Okay, so some people had some questions about the old terms. So one question was, who's Sargon? Remember, he's the guy that built the first empire we know of. He conquered a large part of Mesopotamia. That's him right there. He built a very big empire using a permanent standing army by tearing down the defensive walls of other cities. He appointed his sons to be rulers, and his daughter Enheduanna ended up serving as a high priestess. And this, in many ways, I mean, he killed a lot of people, and he had a problem because he had to convince people that he conquered that they should accept him and be willing to sacrifice for his empire. That's one reason it didn't last very long. But it did bring some benefits, such as encouraging trade. So he made the areas between these cities safe to trade at. He standardized the different kinds of goods and measurements between the cities, and that was somewhat beneficial. So people would still try and build empires, even though his didn't last so long, and they would try and address these issues. So that was Sargon, very quickly. Someone asked about Solomon. Remember, he was a Hebrew king who built the temple, right? Remember, it's the temple, capital T, because Jews believed there was only one God, and he should be served at that one temple. So keep that in mind. Someone had asked who Cincinnatus was, and remember, Cincinnatus was a dictator, and we're used to that term being negative. But in Rome, the office of dictator was an actual political office. You were appointed dictator during a time of national emergency and given absolute power for 1 month. And you were supposed to give it up after 1 month. And people generally did. And Cincinnatus was considered kind of the ideal of this. He was out plowing in his fields one day when the Senate came to him and said, we treated you badly earlier. You may recall that. He was treated badly by the Senate. But you're the only man who could save Rome. So please come save Rome. And he went out, defeated Rome's enemies, saved Rome, and actually gave up power early. He didn't even need the whole month. He gave up power early and then went back to his plowing. So that's Cincinnatus. And of course, I emphasize how that's connected to the United States. We also had someone ask who Justinian was and about the Justinian Law Code. Justinian was a Byzantine emperor. He and his wife Theodora made quite the power couple, I like to mention. And one thing he tried to do was organize all the laws. They had all these different laws that had been passed at different times, and some of the laws contradicted each other. So it wasn't clear what law you should follow and if someone was committing a crime or not. So he said, let's organize those and let's issue a unified law code. And that law code still influences European law to this day. Let's see. Someone asked who Averroes was. Averroes was a Muslim philosopher and scientist. And I used him as an example of how many Muslims did think faith and religion could go together, even though some other Muslims disagreed with them. And I also used him as an example of how there could be kind of positive connections between Christians and Muslims during this time, because this is Averroes in a painting that was made by a Catholic Christian, and that is one of Averroes's texts translated into Latin, right? Which remember was the universal language of Europe and of Christianity, or Catholic Christianity at this time. Some people ask about Kush and Amonerenas. Kush was a African country south of Egypt, so it was influenced by Egypt but was independent, right? So they borrowed Egyptian ideas, just like Koreans and Japanese might borrow from China and maintain their political independence. Kush did the same thing. Amonerenas was the queen of Kush when it was threatened by the Romans, specifically by Augustus, and she was able to fight the Romans to a standstill and maintain her country's independence. Right, so that's Amonerenas. We had another question about Africa, and that was about the kingdom of Ethiopia, which is southeast of Kush. The question in particular, one thing you want to remember is that Ethiopia is a African Christian country, and there's a story connected to Ethiopia, called The Glory of Kings. And this story shows the close connection between the monarchy and the church in Ethiopia, because in this story there's a guy named Menelik. That's one of the old terms that could appear on the triad. Remember, the triad will have at least one old term. So keep that in mind. Menelik, it is said, was the son of Solomon and the queen of Sheba. If you're familiar with the Hebrew scriptures, with the Old Testament, there's a story of a queen of the south coming to see Solomon. Well, Ethiopia is certainly south of Israel. So Ethiopians said, aha, the queen of Sheba was an Ethiopian queen, right? This is one of our queens. And the story goes that Solomon and the queen of Sheba had a child, and that child was Menelik. Right? So what that means then, and then all the Ethiopian kings claim descent through Menelik. So the Ethiopian kings claimed to be both African, right, because they were descended from the Queen of Sheba, but also be part Hebrew because they were descended through Solomon. And of course, Solomon was the son of David, right, the great Hebrew King David. And if you're a Christian king, what better king can you be descended from than David? And of course, Jesus himself is descended from the line of David, right? That's why he went to Bethlehem to be, I'm going off track. But Jesus is also from the house of David. So through this story, the glory of kings, the monarchy and the church in Ethiopia, the monarchy was able to claim a close connection with the church and with these important people from the ancient Christian past, right? And Jewish past, the son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. They also claim that later on Menelik would go back and visit Solomon when he was older, and he actually stole the Ark of the Covenant. So if you want to find the Ark of the Covenant now, even today, it's in Ethiopia. So the story goes. And this close connection between the monarchy and church in Ethiopia gave the Ethiopians a strong sense of identity. It made them willing to sacrifice to protect their country, and that's one reason why this country is going to maintain its identity and existence until 1936, when it's conquered by Italy. They had the advantage of airplanes and poison gas. Later it would become independent again. It's still independent to this day. So it's one of the most ancient of African independent countries. The last question that people had about old terms was, who is Pachacuti? Pachacuti is basically the guy, he's not quite the founder, but he's the guy that protected the early Incan Empire. Right? Remember when they were under attack by the Chancas, by their enemies, he was able to defeat the Chancas by knocking over their mummy in battle, and that enabled him and the Incas to defeat them and to go on to build a very large Incan empire. Remember, he's the guy that claimed to be descended from the sun. Or, I'm sorry, he didn't claim to be descended from the sun. He had a vision of the sun, right? And they used this religion of the sun to unite their empire, which eventually was made up of lots and lots of different people. True or false? Hammurabi was a Babylonian king who established a law code. True. Excellent. Hatshepsut was a female pharaoh. True. That is true. Amenhotep IV was a pharaoh known for his belief in the old gods. False. Why is it false? Yeah, he believed in one God. He wanted to get rid of the old gods. He wanted one God that he had a special relationship with to make him more powerful. True or false? Solomon was the Jewish king who built the temple. True. That is a true statement. Cyrus was a Persian king who conquered Israel and forced the Jews into exile.
False.
False, right? He's the guy that liberated them, that let them go back to Israel and rebuild the temple. True or false? Siddhartha Gautama founded the religion of Hinduism.
False.
False. What religion did he found?
Buddhism.
Buddhism, right? It was kind of a reform movement, in a sense. Again, because remember, he accepted some Hindu ideas, but he challenged others. Especially, he said, I don't want enlightenment in a few hundred lives, I want enlightenment now. Ashoka was an Indian king who promoted Buddhism.
True.
That is a true statement. That is a true statement. Yeah, he thought Buddhism was awesome.
Over everything, he's like, hey, Buddhism.
Yeah, he's like, after I conquered everything, now it's time to be peaceful.
Hey, look, here's this new religion.
Right, yeah. Sun Tzu was a famous Chinese, historian.
False.
False, right? What was he famous for?
Art of war.
Right, he wrote The Art of War. Right, he wrote The Art of War. Confucius believed that China could only be governed with strict laws because people are basically evil.
False.
False, right? He thought that people could be governed through morality and ritual and music because people are basically good. Shi Huangdi successfully unified China and centralized the government.
True.
Annie?
True.
True, that's true. Sorry. No, Grayson, you're correct. I got to give Annie credit.
Oh.
Emperor Wu was the third woman to rule China as emperor.
False.
False. One and only emperor to rule China. And I say emperor purposely, not empress, because I want to emphasize she was the same as any other emperor, all the male emperors, but she was the only woman who did it. Homer was a Greek poet whose poems tell us much about Greek values.
True.
True. Xerxes was the Persian emperor who successfully conquered the Greeks.
False.
False, right? He failed to conquer the Greeks. He fought them, but he lost. Themistocles was an Athenian who convinced people to invest their money in ships, helping to defeat the Second Persian invasion. That is a true statement. Socrates was a Greek philosopher who studied everything.
False.
False, that's Aristotle. Socrates was the guy who questioned. Right? Aristotle was the one who focused on anything and everything. Socrates was the guy who asked questions till he got himself killed. Alexander built a great empire that spread Greek culture.
True.
True. Cincinnatus was a Roman dictator who gave up his post to return to his farm once his job was done.
True.
True. Excellent. Augustus was about to become Roman emperor but was assassinated before he could.
False.
False. He did successfully become the Roman emperor. Caesar was the one who almost became emperor but got killed before he could. Spartacus led a successful slave rebellion against the Romans.
False.
Successful.
False. It was not successful. He led a successful slave revolt, wasn't successful. Remember, Spartacus has nothing to do with Sparta. A lot of people think he does, but he's from the Roman civilization, not a Greek. Though an important Christian missionary, Paul wrote very little.
False.
False. He wrote about 40% of the New Testament. Perpetua was the first Christian Roman emperor.
False.
False. No, that was Constantine, right? Perpetua was what?
A martyr.
Yeah, you better know that one. You read a book about her. Augustine was a Roman theologian who developed concepts of original sin and just war.
True. True.
That is a true statement. Yep. Benedict was a European Christian monk whose motto was work and pray.
True.
That is a true statement. Charlemagne is known as the father of Europe because after he was crowned emperor by the Pope, he built an empire that lasted more than 300 years.
True.
False, it didn't last. Remember, his empire falls apart. Right? They're not able to build a new Roman empire. It doesn't work. Justinian was a Byzantine emperor who, with the support of his wife Theodora, established law code and built a great church.
True.
True. Muslims believe that God revealed the Quran to Muhammad.
False. False.
That's true.
No, that's true. Yep.
Wasn't it one of the angels was the one that...
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. They still would say this is true. God, the angel does at God's command. You're overthinking. Yeah, be careful about overthinking if you really know your stuff. But yeah, no, that's right. Averroes was a Muslim philosopher who opposed reason is dangerous to faith. False. Yeah, he thought the two go together. Ibn Battuta was a traveler who visited Mali.
True.
True. That's a true statement. Yep, he did. Mansa Musa was a great Christian king in Africa.
False.
False. He was Muslim. Menelik was an Ethiopian king who was said to be the son of Solomon and the queen of Sheba.
True.
That is a true statement. Amuranas fought the Egyptians in order to maintain her country's independence.
True.
False.
Who did she fight?
Oh, she
She,
fought the Romans.
she fought the Romans. Right. There she lived south of Egypt, but she didn't fight the Egyptians, she fought the Romans. Pachacuti built up an Incan empire which had a palace high in the mountains called Machu Picchu.
True.
That is a true statement. Genghis Khan united the Mongols, but his confederation broke up into multiple tribes before he could conquer much territory.
False.
False. He conquered a bunch of territory. He's the guy that overcame the problem posed by tribal loyalty. Well, that